essay I was trying to think of from Emerson is Self-Reliance. You all have probably read that, but if you haven't, it's online. It's probably one of the best statements of the importance of being true to yourself that I think I've ever read. There's a lot of good material out there. And, Emerson's language is a bit archaic, but I think he was a brilliant individual. And that's the important thing to remember. You don't see too many movements that were started by committees. They're usually started by individuals. And committees grow up, of course, around those individuals, and movements and all grow up around that. But it's people with a revelation, with an idea. And we just can't underestimate the importance of maintaining the integrity of the soul. That your soul unfolding is an experience that has not occurred anywhere else ever in this universe. You are a unique expression of God. There's only one you. We're all connected at the spiritual level. But there's only one you. And there never will be another one. There never has been. And so that is a sacred thing to know, that you are the temple of the living God. It's not just a cliche, it's really true. I told the story quite a while ago I had the experience quite a while ago of the woman that in a church, the church I was at we were at in Springfield, she planted a whole bunch of red tulips, and among those red tulips grew a yellow one. And I don't know if she did that intentionally, but I got some mileage out of that, because that yellow tulip did just as well and shown its full beauty, despite the fact that it was surrounded by red tulips. And I think that's how nature works. It doesn't compare itself to others. How many of you have small dogs? Are they afraid of big dogs? They don't think like we do. They would maybe be wise to think like we do, because big dogs can do some damage to small dogs. But perception is a very powerful thing. How we see ourselves, how we think of ourselves, or how we think of a situation that we're going through. And this is what I want to talk about today, the truth about Thanksgiving. A level of thanksgiving that we can apply to whatever we're going through in life, especially if it feels like we're not doing so well, or feels like there's something out there that's larger than we are, and we don't know quite how to deal with it, how to handle it. That there is a principle, as I say often, behind every holiday that we acknowledge, there is some spiritual principle, and that's true of Thanksgiving in particular. So the Thanksgiving principle is normally we give thanks after having received some desired good. Thanksgiving is an effect. So that's kind of how we think about it. It's centered around the harvest, the idea of the harvest. That's when we bring everything in and look at the bounty and all of that. And we give thanks for that, for what we have. As a spiritual principle, the act of thanksgiving is a cause, an activity we engage in before there's evidence of a desired good. So in a sense, there's the harvest, but there's also the season of planting. And when we're engaged in that aspect of it, we're visualizing, we're seeing the result of our planting. We're holding a picture. You plant a garden and you envision what is going to unfold through the seeds that you're putting into the ground. And it tends to, if you tend it right and everything, tends to produce. But in a sense, to drop a seed in the ground is an act of thanksgiving. It's to give thanks for something before there's any evidence that you've received it. It's an act of faith. And faith is one of our faculties that we do use all the time. And that's part of the value of stopping, pausing and looking at a principle at a certain during a certain season, is how am I using my faith? Is my faith directed toward the greater good, or is my faith directed in the belief that this is going to crumble, that this is going to tear me apart, this is going to cause me to fail in some way? How am I using my faith? What am I giving thanks for? And we say, well, I'll be a lot more thankful when this thing is resolved. And we all understand that. We understand that we want to resolve things. We don't want things hanging over our heads, whether we're individuals or a country or the world. We want to resolve things so we can be thankful. But here we're looking at the idea that we can lift up our eyes and begin to give thanks even before we see the result. And again, we drop the seed in the ground. That's kind of what we're doing. It's an act of faith. And we're engaging our faculty of imagination in that as well. You buy a package of seeds and you look at the cover and you see the finished product. You see the tomatoes on the vine, you see the head of lettuce or cabbage or whatever you're planting, the zucchini. So you're carrying this picture of what you want to see come up out of the ground. It's an act of faith, but it's also an act of thanksgiving. Isn't there kind of an excitement around buying seeds or tilling your garden? And, there's a whole anticipation there. Would you go to the labor of doing all of the stuff that's involved in a garden if you weren't expecting the greater good to unfold, if you weren't expecting to see that harvest? If we could apply that principle in everything we do, and the reason we can do that without much hesitation is because we've done it so many times before. But in truth, you've never failed in life. There's nothing you've ever done that's been a failure because you're here. You've come up to this point. You may have had things that didn't go exactly like you wanted, but you did survive them. You succeeded in going through them. We don't always give ourselves credit for that. Maybe that sounds like a cop-out. Maybe that sounds like a reduction of faith. But as one of the posters I created, if every dream I ever had came true, I would have died a long time ago of a sugar overdose in a candy store. I used to dream about eating all the candy. I used to love smoked oysters, and I worked in a grocery store as a kid, and I decided to buy several cans of smoked oysters because I couldn't get enough of them. And about the third can, I've never eaten a smoked oyster since, so it totally broke me. I overdid it. So that dream came true, and it was not one that I maintain today. I leave that one alone. It's okay. So if you're buying the smoked oysters and eating away at them, you say this or something better. Well, it's sometimes good to reach your limit so you can get over that and get past that. Anyway, Jesus gave thanks before he had the disciples begin passing out the meager supply of loaves and fishes. That story. Well, the 5,000, and in one case 7,000 people were there and there was no food. This little boy had a couple of loaves and a couple of fish that they brought to him, and so he began to break them up and pass them around. But first thing he did was give thanks. Give thanks for the abundance. And then he began to take the action of passing it around. His attention was not on the apparent limited quality or quantity of food available, but on God as his ever-present source. He blessed the food, which means he was seeing it from the consciousness of wholeness. In other words, he had this limited amount of supply in his hands, But that's not what he was looking at. You see, that's not where his faith was. If it was, he would have said to the little boy, "Thank you for that. Now get along, I've got mine now." And some scholars believe that just the act of passing out, him seeing this limitation and saying, "I'm not going to stop here. I'm not going to worry about this. I'm going to start giving it out. Start giving." That other people who were also out in the desert without food, they thought, started doing the same thing. They pulled, their loaf of bread from beneath their robe, or they pulled whatever food they would have brought. How many of you would go out knowing what you know about the desert? How many of you would go out in the desert without provisions? None of us. Not if we were walking particularly, going out, because we understand. And so what scholars point out is these people were not idiots. They wouldn't follow him out there and say, "Oh, I forgot my lunch. I forgot my food bar." When we go out, we take water with us. We go out, we take food. So that's one explanation of how. It's an explanation that makes sense to me. I'll say that. I don't know if it's true or not. Nobody knows. But it's no less a miracle. Because how would he know, as he began to give out this food, others would do the same? He wouldn't know. It was an act of faith. It was an act of putting his actions and his beliefs in one place. And that's a very powerful thing to do. It's like the story out of Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, and I don't remember what country it was. Some country was invading another country, and they landed their ships on the shore and they burned them because they were not going to give themselves the option to retreat. So that's kind of what Jesus was doing in that situation. He was taking something that he had in hand and risking losing that based on his own faith. So he was putting action behind his belief system. A very important thing to do. Because otherwise, this is just a philosophy. And it doesn't do anybody much good, including us, especially us. If we are in a situation where we don't know what to do and we're looking at our spiritual values as worthless in this situation, then why do we even bother? What a crisis does is it makes us get down to what we really believe is true and what we're really committed to. That's the value of it. It's the opportunity to do a self-inventory. What is true? What do I really believe to be true? And I know that feeling of, as I said, I think last week or the week before sometime, about how it can be aggravating when somebody is having a problem and says, "Let's pray about it." Well, that can almost seem offensive, if you think of prayer as, well, let's try to get God to intervene. If he hadn't done it so far, why would he do it now? Does he need our permission? Does he need our request? But to pray about it is to make an adjustment, is to get into ourselves. What do you really believe? What is this triggering in you that is causing you or asking you to step up spiritually? So that's where the Thanksgiving thing comes in. We're often faced with circumstances that proclaim there's not enough to go around. Maybe you're in such a situation now. You may find yourself turning to God asking for help. Jesus' example indicates the importance of first lifting our attention above the appearance and acknowledging God as our unfailing supply. We give thanks for the solution that is now forthcoming. So you don't hear Jesus saying, "Please God, we have a need. Help us with this need." He just says, thank you for the answer. Thank you for the solution. And that's a pretty important principle. We also hear that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. We're all familiar with Hebrews 11:1. It's pretty much ingrained in all of our consciousness. In faith, we affirm the answers we seek are present even before we see them. So think of anything you're going through at this moment, and anything that's got you in a tizzy. Try to pull your emotion out of it. I think that's a very important step, because the emotion just magnifies. Try to pull your emotion out of it. And that's not your belief. It's just your emotion can take you places you just don't want to go. And the imagination. Where's your imagination? Is it bouncing off the walls? What's it doing? Reel these things in. Lift up your eyes. That is, take your eyes off the appearance. And when you take your eyes off the appearance, you'll find that your body relaxes. You'll find you have a physical reaction to that because you've done something first. You've lifted up your eyes. In faith, we affirm the answers we seek are present even before we see them. So, how do you know your faith is working? It's by how you feel. You begin to relax. We pause to let go of the negative energy we've placed in the appearance, and we begin giving thanks that the proper solution is now forthcoming. Thanksgiving becomes a creative action rather than a simple reaction. Does that make any sense? It's important to give thanks for what we have and to appreciate what we have. But this is another way to think of it. It's like the other side. There's always two sides to the coin. So one is giving thanks beforehand, which is what we're talking about today. So just think of any area of your life where you can apply this principle, because you can begin right now to feel the peace that comes with knowing that the greatest good is now unfolding through you and through your life. All right? Thanks for coming out, and I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving this year.
You've been watching a talk given by Reverend Doug Bottorff here at Independent Unity in beautiful Grand Junction, Colorado. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us spread our message. If you would like to support us, you can do so by clicking the button in the right-hand corner of the video screen. We greatly appreciate your support. Thanks again for watching.